Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maria Pio, and I am co-director at the Godwin-Ternbach Museum at Queens College, where I oversee administration and education programs such as this one. My co-director, Louise Weinberg, who curated the current virtual exhibition, Human Nature, Portraits from the Permanent Collection, is also joining us this evening, as is Stephanie Lee, our museum assistant. I know that given the circumstances, unfortunately, we cannot all be in the museum today, but I'm so happy to see so many faces virtually here in this space together. If you have not had a chance after the program, I invite you to view our virtual exhibition on our website at www.gtmuseum.org. And there you will also find information about upcoming programs this fall. I want to take a quick moment just to thank our donors and funders, including the Friends of the Godwin-Ternbach Museum, the Avery Arts Foundation, the Matisse Foundation, Kofferberg Center for the Arts, and Queens College. Without their support, we would not be able to bring this type of program to you all today. Lastly, given that we're all together in this virtual space, I just want to go over a few reminders for our virtual program this evening. Please remember to mute when you're not speaking. This will help get rid of any background noise that we may have. You can use the chat function to submit any questions or comments throughout the presentation. There will be a Q&A after the presentation, so we will go through those together. Please remain courteous and respectful, and of course, hateful language of any kind will not be tolerated. Well, this evening, I am thrilled to welcome back in many ways artist Deja Patterson, who is a recent graduate of Queens College, where she received her MFA in Studio Arts this past May. Deja is both a painter and a photographer. Her art addresses social discrimination against women through size suppression, body shaming, and the physical impossibility of beauty standards. Powerful, monumental women dominate Patterson's examinations of sexuality, race, and physique. Please keep an eye out, as Deja will be part of a group show titled Reclaimed Reimagined at the Field Projects Gallery from November 12th through December 12th of this year. So keep an eye out for that. Without further ado, I just want to let us give a warm welcome to Deja Patterson.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. I just want to come out and say thank you all so much for joining me here today. Given the circumstances, I appreciate each and every one of you for joining us today. I am a recent graduate of Queens College, and I'm thrilled to be back. Big shout out to all the QC students, faculty, and staff who are on this Zoom call today. So let's get started, guys.
Awesome, great. We will let me pull up the presentation. Okay. All right. Also, please bear with us, as you know, we're in the digital world, so there may be some hiccups along the way, but please bear with us as we do this.
All right, guys. So, of course, I do identify as a fat Black femme, and today I'd like to get started and give you a few thoughts, a few of my sentiments about beauty standards in relation to the fat Black female body. Next slide, please. So, of course, Black women, I feel, were virtually excluded from art history with proper representation. Oftentimes, when you would see Black women in historical paintings, they were often in positions of service. And I think that this painting here is a very famous, it's a prime example. Of course, this is Manet's Olympia from 1865. It debuted in the Paris Salon. And of course, this painting was very controversial and very it was a big thing at the time because of the nude figure, which is the white female, and oftentimes the Black woman, the Black figure in the piece is often overlooked. And I think I'd like to dive into her today. There's a Black feminist by the name of Lorraine O'Grady, and she had a few words to say about the role that the Black figure plays in this piece here today. She says that the Black maid is not simply a darkly colored counterpart to Olympia's whiteness, but rather an emblem of the dark, threatening, anomalous sexual lurking just under Olympia's hand. At least this is the fantasy Manet's servant figure may well have aroused in the male spectator of 1865. She also goes on to say that this allows the Black maid, who was named Laura, also allows whiteness to function as the only subject of consideration. And I also noticed that when this dark skinned Black maid is paired with a lighter skin toned woman, the Black female model stands in as a signifier to all of the racial stereotypes of the West in that time. So, of course, Olympia sort of takes on the role as a Jezebel. And unfortunately, the Black female figure takes on the mammy role that we find um, very common, especially in the West. Um, Next slide, please. I can't help but to think of, like the Aunt Jemima stereotype, as well as the literal mammy in Gone with the Wind, in old Hollywood. That's the first person. She set, the bar for so many Black actresses, but unfortunately the role that she played was not um as how I would like to see Black women represented. So this is one of my favorite paintings. This is a 1761 painting by Sir Joshua Reynolds. It's entitled Lady Elizabeth Keppel and the Servant. And I want you guys to remember this piece because I'm going to reference it a little bit later on today. I think it's interesting how Sir Joshua Reynolds sort of dehumanized the servant in this place. Just think of the title of the piece. We can Google and find out more things about Lady Elizabeth Keppel, but I feel as if the Black figure in the bottom left corner is sort of just like, oh, and the servant. Another representation of how Black people are only acceptable in certain on certain platforms and positions of service. I can say from my personal accounts, this is true. I think that there are a lot of parallels to how this Black woman is represented today to how she's represented in this painting to how some Black women are represented today. My personal experiences, such as maybe when I was an undergrad, I worked at an all Black staff. We were servers at a restaurant working under, the direction of an all white supervision. It's still, nothing has changed much over centuries of time. Next slide, please. So there is no secret that the objectification of women is nothing new, especially with Black women. So I'm going to tell you guys about a little bit about someone who I think is very important. This is Sarah Bartman. She was born in 1789 in Congo, South Africa. She's the best known woman of at least two South African Khoikhoi women who was objectified by European spectators. So basically, she headlined in a freak show. She was very popular due to her very large behind. It was something very out of the ordinary. And basically, that's what made her main attraction. So she stood about 4'10", and in 1810, she was brought to England by a free Black man named Hendrik Caesars, and she was accompanied with an English doctor named William Dunlop. So basically, they want to show her nude in the nude so spectators could come and see her nude body. And, a lot of emphasis was placed on her very large behind. So she spent her early 20s. So she was about 20, 21 years old when she first arrived. And she spent 4 years in England and in Ireland as a part of a freak show. People could come see her for a fee, but for an additional fee, you can poke her with a stick and or touch her. And for an additional fee, you could touch her genitals, just blatant disrespect to this woman. So a group of British abolitionists argued that her performance was indecent, and they said, hey, you're holding her against her will. But William Dunlop argued that they had this special contract. So they actually did go to court. Um, they actually did go to court about it, and Dunlop formulated this contract saying that, oh no, Sarah wants to perform, she's doing this willingly, but we all know in today's standards, this is totally human trafficking. I hate to say it. Like, this is my own opinion. Like, I highly doubt that Sarah would have wanted this for herself. So there, another important person I want to tell you guys about is George Cuvier. He was a founder and professor of comparative anatomy at the Museum of Natural History at that time. And of course, with the history of evolution, how we evolved from, apes and things of that nature. He claimed, after doing an examination of Sarah Bartman, that she was the missing link between animals and human beings. So he literally dehumanized her. It's like, oh, well, she's part animal, part monkey, and part human. So for some reason, he was convinced that due to her voluptuous anatomy, that she was not completely human. And to further dehumanize her, she was sold to an animal trainer in 1814. His name was S. Rowe, and she was often shown at the Palais Royal. So he was an animal trainer, and he did rape and impregnate her. She had 2 children that we know about, but both of them had died under the age of 5. Um, so Sarah died at the age of 25 or 26 of an unknown, what we believe is like a respiratory infection. But however, even though she suffered a really horrible life, she still did not have dignity following her death. I think that's really interesting. She was further objectified even after her death. Cuvier dissected her body and displayed her remains in a museum. So she was on display almost for at least 150 years after her death at the Museum of Man in Paris. And you could view her brain, her skeleton, and he pickled her genitalia. And he made right after her death, he made a plaster cast of her body. And so, next slide, please. So, yeah, on the left-hand side, that is the uh, plaster cast that you could see of her that was on display. And this was well into like the middle of the 20th century that you could still see this on display. And on the right, you can see, yeah, that's a further example of what you would see if you went into the museum. She did not her remains were not returned to her home country of South Africa until 2002. So that's very recent. Almost 200 years after this woman's death, she was objectified. And her remains are now, she's finally been laid to rest in 2002. And now she's in South Africa. So I think that it's really important to talk about things, especially the story of Sarah Bartman. She's not the only woman that endured this. She's not the only Black woman that endured this. She's just one of the more famous women cases and stories. We can go on to the next slide, please. So let's talk about Marilyn Monroe. I think it's really interesting. So I decided to compare the two. So of course, the first thing that you think of when you talk about Marilyn Monroe is, oh, she was so curvaceous. Sort of like the epitome of beauty at that time in the 1950s and the early 1960s. But I think, of course, she was famous for her voluptuous behind and her curvy legs and large breasts. But it's interesting how when a Black woman displayed similar features and similar physical attributes, she was deemed like almost unhuman. But we praise this white celebrity. And granted, I am aware that they both live in 2 completely different times. And, there were changing attitudes towards sexuality when Marilyn Monroe was very prominent. But I think it's interesting how we look at her as a major icon of pop culture. And of course, in 1953, I read somewhere that it said that she was the most marketable Hollywood actress. And of course, it focused on her sex appeal. She went on to star in roles such as in movies such as Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire. So I think it's interesting how the legacy that Sarah Bartman left that was solely based around her physical appearance and how we remember a white woman, Marilyn Monroe. I think it's pretty interesting. A double standard, if you ask me. We can go on to the next slide. So we are in the age of Instagram and Insta baddies. Most of you guys may know me from Instagram. If you don't follow me, you should. So of course we have the queen of the gram herself. On the left, we have Kim Kardashian West, and the rest of the girls. I'm not quite sure who they are, but they are very they're Insta baddies that I found on my own timeline. And this image is a little unrealistic, in my opinion. Kim she fluctuates between the size 6 and an 8. And of course, she's actually wearing a very, very tight corset in the ensemble that she's wearing on the left at the Met Gala. I watched a little YouTube video of how she got into it. But the illusion that she's trying to give off it's a very unrealistic body standards. It's all about the big breasts and the big hips and the cinched waist. Did you know that the average American woman is a size 14? Uh, and I think it's interesting in the fashion industry, anyone that's like I think it's like 12 or 14 is considered plus size. So that's a really interesting thing to me. And of course, if you have large breasts and large hips, of course you want some more than likely you'll have a large midriff area as well. And when I was scrolling on Instagram, I noticed to myself, like, I look nothing like these women. In the days of filters, we filter ourselves to make our skin complexion look lighter, forcing those Eurocentric beauty standards on women of color, especially. We all want lighter eyes and narrow noses. Next slide, please. So on the left is the cover of the Cosmopolitan UK. That is Testa Holiday. She's also a fellow native Mississippian. Big shout out to her. So she's the very first person that I saw in mainstream media that I felt that looked like me. I'm a size 24. Tess is a size 22, 24. And I was like, wow, this woman, she's a realistic representation of fat women. And when this magazine came out, it sparked a lot of controversy, and a lot of people, there were two sides. Of course, people who decided to fat shame her clearly don't have much to do with themselves, and there was the other side of people who praised her. But I think that it's interesting that people decide to praise fat women just for existing. I think that is actually a microaggression. Should we not be comfortable in ourselves? Like, it's sort of like there's this preconceived notion that we're insecure and that we are taking a leap of faith for existing and doing things that people who are thinner than us are doing. No, I don't think that Tessa Holiday is brave. She is sexy. Call her what she is. She looks good. And of course, on the right, we have our beloved Lizzo. And I often get compared to Lizzo, but just simply because we're fat and we're Black women. But I think that we are two very different people in our own right. I respect her, and she is someone a little closer to myself that I can identify with. And I love Lizzo to death. I love her platform and what she stands on. So I want to talk a little bit about why I got into art that praises the fat body. I was at a TV show taping when I first moved to New York. That was something that I like to do a lot. And I went with a friend. She was white, she was thin, and she was pretty. But I didn't think much of it because, we're here for the TV show taping. And so when you're together as a group, as a party, they're supposed to sit you together. But the producers of the show decided to take the white girl and place her in the front within camera range. They placed me, a fat Black woman, in the back of the audience, sort of out of range and out of view of the camera. Another producer tried to bring me back down, but this woman came back and insisted that I sit in the back, out of range, out of view of the camera. And so this was just like the icing on the cake for me. And it really made me feel some type of way. Instead of making me feel as if I was the person with the problem, like, no, it's her and it's these unrealistic standards. And it wasn't a white or Black thing. I understand that there are two different factors because the person's show that it was a Black woman. And I noticed that when they placed people in the front, there were Black girls there, but they were size 4 and they were racially ambiguous and they were white girls. But all the darker skinned Black women like myself, and even heavy set women who were not white, there were other fat women there too, white women, but they were placed in the back. So I was like, oh, this is clearly a size thing. There were gorgeous girls, including myself, who were excluded from taking part and having a good time at the show. So after that, I was just like, you know what? I love myself and I'm not gonna let people's own insecurities and their own ideals affect me and what I'm going to do. And so I decided to speak out about it. And I created these pieces upon my last year in grad school. Next slide. So on the left, that's me in my painting. It's called Pupa. Pupa is an acronym for fat upper area. And we all have one. You know, you got one too, ladies. Basically, it's a large stomach. And it seems like being curvaceous is only acceptable when you know, large breasts, wide hips, cinch waist. But I know plenty of women that do not look like that, and they still are very attractive and appealing in their own right. So that's what made me create that piece on the left. And on the right, there is that's my piece. That's modeled after myself as well. I decided to emphasize the cellulite that's on my thighs and the cellulite that's on my behind because, you know, in the days of Photoshop and Instagram, everyone has such smooth skin and they're always under a ring light and they're always taking selfies at the golden hour. And women, we do not look like that all the time. So I wanted to show real representation of how women look when they're all dolled up, when they're at their best, and when they're just chilling in their granny panties like me in these pictures here. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is one of my favorite paintings that I've done. This is called Big B. Use your imagination what the B stands for. I purposely decided to, pardon me, I purposely decided to, sorry guys. Is the screen still on? Sorry about that. Got a little too happy with the kicking. Okay. Back in business. We don't let that stop us. All right. Is the screen on, Maria? Okay, let's see. I can't see it.
You're good, you're good.
I can't see the screen.
That's okay. You're back where we were, so you're good.
My screen is on. See that my screen is on, but I can't see the PowerPoint. Okay, I can see it. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, so this is my favorite painting, Big B. I purposely made her larger than, it's actually modeled after myself. So I'm not narcissistic in any way. The reason that I decided to use myself as a model is because when I began this project, I was a broke grad student. I couldn't pay anyone to come to my studio and pose nude for me. And people and other plus size, before they saw the paintings, other plus size women were a little apprehensive to come to my studio and pose nude for me. So I was like, I'd never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. So I use myself as a model. So that's me pouring chocolate sauce on my chest. The image references some photos that I took in my bathtub. I purposely made her larger than life, to sort of intimidate the viewer. Historically, you know how Black women were looked down upon. So it's sort of, you have to look up at her. Okay, next slide, please. So I was on a roll with these monochromatic paintings with the pink tone to them. And then COVID happened. And then, of course, I lost access to my studio space. And the scale that I worked on is a lot smaller now. So I went from painting 8-foot paintings to 18 by 24s, working in my small New York City apartment. What can I say? So this piece is entitled Board in the House. I think we all had that looming depression when COVID first hit, being restricted. And of course, we had a lack of access to supplies. So on the left there, I have a can of Lysol spray. That was my prized possession in mid-March all the way up until the beginning of May, because that's the only, and we didn't really have a clear idea of how COVID was spread at the time. You remember, we thought it, I just did not have access to disinfectant spray, and I paid like $40 for that can. So I thought, this is my prized possession. It deserves to be in this painting with me. So this painting is entitled Board in the House, because I found myself depressed, naked, in my granny panties, in bed all the time. And yeah, next slide, please. So be honest, you know that we all picked up that COVID-20. We all picked up about 15 to 20 pounds. Be real with me and be real with yourself. You know it happened. So this painting is called My 300-Pound Life. And this is based on what I was doing mid-April. I was always at the refrigerator. You remember that time when we all were like panic buying food because we didn't know if the grocery store would run out of stock. And so this is actually modeled after, there's another Instagram influencer. Her name is Talisha Wilson. She took photographs of herself just rummaging through the refrigerator. And I thought this would be hilarious if I took myself and placed myself in this and recreated that. So it's called My 300-Pound Life. I was always eating maybe 6 times a day. I don't know. We're not going to get into specifics. We're not going to get into specifics of how much we all ate. I also decided in some of my earlier works, I didn't quite include the cellulite because it was something that it's like an ongoing struggle, the acceptance of image. So I was like, you know what? I have cellulite on my butt. Most women do. 90% of women have cellulite. So I was like, whatever. So I decided to include that. And this piece is entitled My 300-Pound Life, because that's all I was doing. Going to the refrigerator, going back to bed with my Lysol. That's what my life was in April. Basically, the entire month. Next slide, please. Okay, so of course, Instagram is very influential in my practice, and it influences all of our lives, actually. So on the left is one of my favorite paintings. It's called Banging Body. I got this photo with permission. You can't go out just taking people's pictures now. Um, from someone's OnlyFans account, and I thought it was really interesting. She's another plus size model that I admire, and look at that tummy. How could you say no to that? And I just really, really do enjoy that piece. And on the right is another Instagram influencer. I think her name is Sophia. I really one thing that a lot of us, I'm going to just speak for me. I'm insecure about I used to be insecure about the rolls on my back. And I thought this photo of her really emphasized the beauty in those cute little nooks on her rear end. And I really did enjoy that. And with her permission, I used that photo as well. And as you can see, I'm playing with the colors a little bit, slowly gravitating towards the pink, but it always snatches me right back on in. And then we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I tell this story a lot. I'm going to tell it again. I used to work at a gentleman's club when I was maybe 19. Okay, you have to be 21 to get in the club. I don't know how I was working there. I was a makeup artist, and I used to work backstage with all of the beautiful ladies, all of the lovely dancers, and some things really resonated with me. A lot of experiences. I only worked there for maybe 2 months tops, but working there, some of the things that were said to these women sort of loomed in my mind. So one dancer had recently had a baby, and of course, postpartum, you have a little loose skin around the stomach area. But the club was new, and the new club owners came in and they did these things to the women called body checks. So basically, they would stand nude in their stiletto platforms in front of this man, and he would just look them up and down and tell them if their physiques, if their bodies were correct or not, if they were desirable enough to dance. And so, of course, when he got to the girl who had a little bit of tummy on her, he's like, oh no, you've got to go home, lose a couple pounds, see you in a month, 6 weeks when you lose the stomach. And of course, that's super embarrassing, but what could she say? She couldn't stand up for herself because, the body was considered her business. And I thought that was just really terrible. And it sort of like now in retrospective, it sort of reminds me of how I felt when I was at that TV show taping, like, oh, no, you're not what the people want. You're not what the people want to see. So that's why I decided to create this. This photo is based off an image that I took. The dancers were thinner, but I decided to give the figure in the foreground a little bit of a love handle action going on there. And I gave the model in the left, in the middle ground, she has a little bit of a double stomach there because at the club that I worked at as the makeup girl, it was totally unacceptable. So I feel as if these women are desirable and that patrons would love to see these women dance, myself included. So that's the little story behind this piece here. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are a few works on paper that I've done. Now, I can never, ever stick to a diet to save my life. And the root word of diet is die, and we don't do that around here. So I was just like, F the diet. I am hungry. Another story that I like to tell, I don't really tell people this, but maybe 3 years ago, I lost about 60 pounds and everyone was telling me how great I looked, how fantastic I was doing. But actually, I was very ill. Not like a serious illness, but I had developed an eating disorder to maintain that 60-pound lighter version of myself, but everyone was congratulating me. Just because I was smaller, they assumed that I was just so much healthier, that I was just so much better. But I would go to the hospital from I was lightheaded all the time, and I was eating way less than the suggested calorie intake for someone my age at the time. So of course, when I began to eat properly, the weight came back. So I just have to come to terms, like people assume because I'm heavy that I just have this poor diet, that I eat Doritos all day. I do love Doritos, but of course I eat things, I do take care of myself. So it's sort of like F the diet, the image reference for that piece was actually I used to take pictures of the scale so I could monitor my weight from like, it was a weird, like, I keep like a journal in my photo album, things like that. But I took that picture and I was just, you know what? F the diet. You're healthy. You're fine. You may not or may not believe me. I do not have high blood pressure. I'm not pre-diabetic. So to associate sickness with someone who's overweight is a little ignorant, but okay, more power to you. And on the right, it's eat now and regret later. At the beginning of COVID, I had panic bought so much pasta because that's all that I could find. And I was like, you know what? I have literally 15 boxes of pasta. They are going to get eaten. And of course, pasta is carbs, and you're not really supposed to eat carbs. So I tried to work with this trainer, and she sent me this. Uh, the trainer actually sent me this diet plan. So it's like no carbs, no sugar, no this, no that. And like maybe 2 days in, I was like, look, I need some chicken Alfredo. So I was just like, I'm gonna eat this now, and then I'm gonna think about the consequences of my poor eating choices later. Yeah, so that's pretty much the little story behind this one. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one is called A Home and Me Number One. I purposely, so of course it's my fact, but again, and it's because, especially in quarantine, the only model I had access to was myself. So that's who I was painting, and that's just a random. I think that oftentimes um, I purposely exposed his genitals and not mine because I feel like women are always objectified. I'm like, let's do that to him. So I was like, how does it feel now? My oh my, how the tides have turned. And so that's why I decided to do that one. That's me in my California king bed going through a breakup during COVID. Isn't that nice? We have the next slide, please. Um, this is another. I took this photo. The image reference was from, I had a timer on my phone, so the hoe is gone, the boyfriend's gone. It's just me and my timer and my camera. And that's basically how I got the image reference for this painting here. Of course, the stomach is on full display. I just stopped caring. I think it's one of my best physical attributes now. I don't know. We'll see. So it's just coming to terms that yes, I have a large stomach, but yes, I am still very much so desirable. And if you look like me, then you're desirable. People who look like me and people who don't look like me as well. All of us are equally as desirable as well. We can have the next slide, please. So this is based off of a quilt by Stephen Towns. This is entitled The Wet Nurse. So basically, in the days of slavery, enslaved women served as wet nurses for privileged white families. And oftentimes, the young Black woman would breastfeed the white offspring, but she had a baby herself. But of course, the white child was prioritized all the time. And sometimes the Black child would die. And I saw a lot of parallels between how the wet nurses were treated and how Black and brown people are treated in museums. I remember working an entry-level position at a certain museum that we will not name. And I noticed that the higher the position, the less there were people of color. All of the executives were white people. And of course, they say, oh, well, we have these initiatives where we're bringing all these people of color, but what positions are you putting these people in? You're putting them in entry level service positions. And like, that's something that really resonated with me. And so I tried to reimagine myself as the wet nurse. And of course, I have an older white gentleman who was sort of representative of the white executives at the museum that I was working at. I came to this revelation after working maybe a 10-hour shift, standing up. My feet were on fire. And I was sitting in like the executive wing. They had this little lobby area. And it was the weekend. And I was sitting there thinking like, wow, I'm literally getting paid barely minimum wage. And I'm giving so much of myself. I'm physically hurting my body, blisters on my feet, aching knees, and other people who were like guards at this museum as well were giving them themselves and literally tearing down their own bodies for the benefit of people who can sit down all day and who weren't even there. They're probably on PTO enjoying their best lives. And here I am breaking down my body so that, we can meet the sales goal of the day. So that was the inspiration behind that piece there. And we can go on to the next slide. So I told you to remember this piece because it was going to come up again. So this is Lady Deja Patterson. Oh, and the servant. So, That the person on the left is my dear friend Ryan Wild. She is such a good sport for posing for me. Sometimes it can be a little interesting finding models for spicy, spicy photo shoots. And basically, I decide to. So, and of course, I'm inspired by Kehinde Wiley as well. You know how he takes portraits and he replaces them with Black figures. And so I decided to, reverse the roles and things like that to sort of address how Black people and Brown people are still in positions of service more oftentimes than not. And that is a little bit about me, a little bit of that goes through my head. Um, I thank you all so much for coming today. And thank you all so much for joining me today. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you so much, Deja. This has been so wonderful. I know the chat is blowing up. I am going to start looking at some of the comments. Please, if you have any questions, you can simply unmute yourself and ask Deja herself, or you can put it in the chat and then I will feed Deja some of these questions as we go along. So let me look through the chat and go back because I know we have some people here. So feel free if you want to ask a question now is your time. If you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do so. Or like I said, you can put it on the chat. Let's see some comments I see. Carol, I think Carol was asking about one of your paintings
Okay.
and the name of the artist. Carol, was this the artist from Instagram as well? I don't know if you want to
answered. It was Sarah Bart. I forgot her name was Sarah Bartman. I wasn't sure, but I got the name, but thank you.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you. Let's see.
I have a question.
Sure.
My name is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
I wanted to ask Deja.
Mhm.
And have you been? First of all, I love your paintings.
Thank you.
Definitely, it's amazing. It's very inspirational. And I see there is a lot of nudity from your body. I wanted to ask you: have you been censored by a gallery or teachers or anyone else from presenting your artwork, your paintings, nude paintings of your body? Have you been told no, you cannot present this in our gallery because it's a nude?
Well, when I first started using Instagram as a platform, I was using primarily photographs, and the photographs were reported and taken down. But I found a loophole, and I began to paint them, and so Instagram stopped censoring me. But I know a lot of other artists who do display their work on Instagram do get censored quite often. So for photographs, yes, I was censored on Instagram. Oh, and Facebook as well for the nudity. But as far as paintings go, no. And I think that Queens College staff has been really supportive of the route and the subject matter that I decided to capture. And I haven't had any pushback about it from them, just social media platforms.
That's amazing. And I really appreciate that because I take pictures of nudes, and also I have done some paintings. I'm actually working on a body of work nude paintings of like a feminism kind of way. And I just wanted to know about the censorship, not just in the school, but also in the gallery art world, like, how they approach that. I don't know if you know, Robert Mapplethorpe.
No,
The photographer, he was censored I think at the Whitney Museum and other museums. But his artwork is a little bit more extreme. And but I definitely love your artwork a lot, your paintings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking questions, Sheila. So we have a question. Don wants to know the name of the painting with the scale, and then the name of the painting with on the right, there was the consuming the pasta. Do you have the names of those paintings?
Oh, yeah, it was just called F the Diet on the left, and on the right, it was just like called like No Regrets.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Harley has a question. You said earlier that you were insecure about your appearance for a while. How did your insecurity transform into appreciation and love? And when did this change occur? It's an excellent question.
At the time, I was dating someone who was I dated a body positive advocate for about on and off for like 2 years. So my partner at that time really, reassured me. And when I moved to New York, I didn't see people that looked like myself often, but through that partner, I was able to submerge myself into the fat community. And then the more I did work, I was able to find other artists who were doing similar things as me. And once I felt a form of like a sense of community, I was able to overcome those negative thoughts. So yeah, this basically having the community support me and reassure me, that was how I was able to overcome it. Actually, community support.
Great, awesome. I have a question. You mentioned, and all your work, the work that you presented it to us. You said you being your own model, right? Like, how does that look in the sense of the process, right? Can you walk us briefly through sort of what does that process look like when you're your own model? Yeah, just interested to know sort of what that looks like and how difficult or easy is it. I'm assuming there's pros and cons to that as well.
It's quite easy. I set up a tripod. I have a little timer in my hand, and I take maybe 200 pictures. Out of 200 photographs, you're gonna like one. So out of 200, you'll like one. So that's how I just, I've already have like the composition in my head. I've probably already sketched it out, probably have an image reference from somewhere else. And I just recreate it using my own body with the timer and the tripod and a lot of patience. And that's pretty much how it is. So it gets easier the more with time.
Yeah. Excellent. Does anyone have any other questions for Deja? I know there's a lot of great comments, Deja. You have to look through the chat. There's so much praise for you. But okay. I have a question from Anna. Do you see yourself as a mentor and role model to the younger generation?
I see myself as being me. Honestly, I do have a lot of younger faces in my life, but I'm not quite, I don't show them, a lot of the work that I do. It's really up to their parents. I leave it because sometimes the subject can be a little racy, a little vulgar sometimes. So I see myself, my audience, and who I'm making the work for 18 plus, to be perfectly honest with you. But as far as the message that I'm trying to convey, I do see myself as a role model for younger people, but sometimes the content of my work is for older audiences in my head when I make the work.
Right, absolutely. And I think, this is when you were talking about like your own work of art and this idea that, you didn't see yourself in many of the art, work of art that you've studied, that you come across. I think it's such a powerful message to say, this can happen too, right? This should happen. This should be in place, right? It shouldn't be like, you mentioned, being praised for it and saying like, you're so brave, but I think it's also the fact that society has sort of constructed this ideal, right? And I think, we're it's a way of sort of pushing through and breaking those standards, right? Which are so, just over the top, that don't make sense, right? It's not real. It's not reality. So I think that's so powerful. I think, just to follow up on that, based on, where we find ourselves today, where, I think once everything happened with COVID, a lot of us spent, and a lot of people, even, on their day-to-day will go and scroll through places like Instagram. How do you think Instagram can be a platform for change rather than for, oppression and sort of idealizing this, this image of what a woman should look like? How do you think it can become more, or can it become more of a platform towards change for that?
I think people have to, first of all, realize that Instagram is not real life. People don't show you the downsides of their life. They only show you when they're partying. They only show you when they're dressed to the T. First of all, we have to understand that Instagram is not real life. These platforms can be misleading. People you think who are living the most glamorous lives probably are not. And I think that it can be an agent for change with the form of community. I speak with people across the world that I would have never encountered any other way outside of social media. So I think that, if you find people, like-minded people like yourself, and we all are honest with ourselves and honest with others, we can form like a community of like-minded people and just show the realities of how average women like myself look on a daily basis, how we present ourselves, things like that.
Yes. Anna said, a circle of trust and granny panties.
Yes, for the granny panties. Yes.
Definitely. This is great. Well, does anybody else, let me see if there's any other questions. If you do want to, yes, you can feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to say a question.
Hi, Miss Deja.
Hey.
I love your work.
Thank you.
It's kind of, I got a question, kind of like going off of what Miss Maria was saying. I know that you started being your own model and painting yourself. Will you continue that journey, or if somebody, or if you can paint somebody else as your model, will you be open to that, or will you continue doing just yourself? Because I love how you capture yourself. Would you still continue to do that, or would be open to both sides?
I would most definitely love to bring other voluptuous people into my studio and to use them as image reference. Yes, of course there are COVID restrictions right now, but like in the future, hopefully 2021 is better to us. I would love to have other models, other people. That would be fantastic. And in between, you might catch me here and there and here, but I would totally be. And I think it's really important that I use people of color. So I would mostly Black people, but I would like to do that. Yes, I would love to have other models pose for me. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's see if there is, we're just approaching our time here, but I want to thank Deja for this amazing talk, for walking us through your work, through your experiences. I think it was so powerful. I certainly am taking a lot from this. And we can't wait to see what you do. So if you can put in the chat any information and your Instagram account. I will also, just for everyone, so everyone knows, by tomorrow probably you'll receive an email from me with a survey that I will ask you. It's very brief, just to fill out, just so that we know what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we can do better. And I can also include some information about Deja in there so that you can keep up with her work as an artist. And again, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for taking the time to sit with us on another Zoom meeting. But we hope that you have enjoyed this, and we're so grateful for you all being here this evening. So thank you, be well, have a great night.